Town of Washington Historical Society meeting held on Friday, March 20th, 1997. And our topic tonight is Millbrook nostalgia. And we have Gertrude, Whalen, Clark, Catherine Donohue, and Edith, Nygren, Layton. And they are going to speak to their memories of attending the Thorne building where they went to school.
Graduated, new people who graduated. It was really a community event celebrating 100 years. And part of that event was interviewing people who had stories to tell, references about the building, recollections of their youth in the community. And we interviewed a great many people. But three special ones are with us tonight. There are a great many wonderful people who have memories of that building. Tonight we're fortunate to have three of them. And as fate would have it, the building we are in is central to one of the stories that they'll have to tell. On the wall, I've set up some of the photographs that we've been able to collect that show students at the Thorne building from 1925 to about 1930, different activities, sports events, the school paper, and so on. That will act as a springboard for many of you, I'm sure, if you look at the pictures. And all of the people who are talking tonight are in those pictures, so you'll have to find them at the end of the evening. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce friends of this community. Many of you know them. Gert, Whalen, Clark, class of 1925. Gert, will you come up here? We're going to sort of sit informally, and I promise it's not a hot seat. Tonight is going to be thinking and talking and remembering what it was like. Again, Gert graduated in 1925 and has great stories to tell. Some of her teachers are shown over there too. So tonight we get to tell tales out of school. Please, Gert, have a seat.
Dear Lord.
Secondly, Francis.
I never thought I'd be so famous.
Francis Donohue and Edith Nygren, Layton, graduated in the class of 1930. And they were both so helpful when it came to me, an outsider, to look at these pictures to figure out which class it was, who the people were. And we spent countless hours looking at the pictures, picking them up and talking, and we giggled and laughed and spent a wonderful afternoon looking at them. And I'm so pleased they're both here tonight. So please, come on up, Catherine and also Edith. Now, while they're getting comfortable, I have to show you something. Edith very modestly said, well, I know you're looking for things for the Thorne building. Do you think anyone would be interested in our class banner? And I said, you have your class banner? She said, oh yes, I never throw anything out. So here it is, Millbrook Memorial School, class of 1930, and those are the colors. So we have it here.
It's like brand new.
And it was featured very much that evening. Well, a little bit, what I thought we'd do is they could each tell you a little bit about where they grew up and what their families did for a living, because I think this is fascinating too. Gert, would you start?
I just don't know what to say. I've always lived here all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was born here.
And you grew up at whereabouts?
Our house was for the Donohue places on 44 now.
Mm-hmm.
There was only our house and barn building there then. And I went to the Madisville School. It was a one-room schoolhouse. And we had one teacher, and one time we had 40 students from first grade to 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 8th grade, I came down to Millbrook. And that's about it. Graduated from there, and then I stayed home. My mother had died when I was younger, so I stayed home and took care of my father. And then when my father died, I went to work for Mr. Birch, who had the Birch's department store in the village, where the Millbrook department store is now. And I worked for, he was a great old fellow. He was a wonderful man. And We sold everything from pins to lace to alcohol to put in your radiator for the winter. You name it, we sold it. And that's about it. I mean, and then from then on, then I got married, and then I went to work after, when our son was maybe 4 or 5. I went to work for Mr. Velletri, who had the village, or the Velletri and Raya, a men's clothing store, and they sold some of all writing things, and and some ladies' things, but not too many. But to get back to Mr. Birch's store, of course, then everybody came from Pleasant Valley. They used to come up from Clinton Corners, from, you know, all around, because there was no such a thing as driving to Poughkeepsie on Saturday night. And everybody came in Saturday night to do their shopping. And you were supposed to close at 9. But while there was anybody in the store stayed open. So if you got home, if it was a busy week and you got home by 10 o'clock, you were very fortunate. But it was interesting and it was fun. And you met all kinds of people and you sold all kinds of things. Nuts, bolts, anything, you name it, we had it. Feed, you used to have seeds and all that kind of thing. And that was about it. And then I went to work for Mr. Blackman, he was great too. It was fun. It was a nice clothing store. He had all nice clothing, as I say. And it was really a very, very nice store. And then we had some all very wealthy people, because most of them belonged to the hunt and rode, and most of them bought, not, I won't say all, but a great many of them bought all their riding equipment from us. And that's about it.
Wonderful.
But it was fun. I enjoyed every bit of it.
May I fill in on that? May I fill in on that?
Yes,
Sure.
Edith, it's your turn, yes.
Not for me, but for Birch's store. The students at the school brought in their second-hand books, and then you bought the book that the previous class had.
We bought the
We didn't have
second-hand
no
one.
books.
Oh, I tell you, we sold everything. Anything we wanted, we sold it.
They were window shades. You sold window shades.
Wallpaper, window shades.
Oh, everything.
Men's clothes, women's
Wonderful
clothes.
store,
You
really.
name it, we had it. We didn't have to go anyplace else. You got it right there.
Excuse me, Gert.
And you
Excuse
had to know where everything was, or God help you. It wasn't like today, let me tell you. It was not like today. I laughed today. I think they should work for the Traverse. You might have made one mistake, but you didn't make one
There's
next
some
one.
offices the way
It
they
was
did too.
really good training. It was good.
Oh, I can imagine.
I enjoyed it.
Ellen has a question.
Yeah, I just want, Gert, now, you said Mr. Burke was it, or Birch?
Birch.
Okay, Mr. Birch. He had the store, what is now the Millbrook department store,
Yeah.
and then he had the store next to it. I mean, the same, like now
That
it's
was the
divided in
AMP,
half.
was right next to it. The AMP was there.
Oh, so he,
Where the laundromat is now used to be the AMP.
that little building where the laundromat is, that was the A&P?
Yeah.
Okay, but now when Joe Spagnola had the store was double its size, and a number of years ago was divided in half. And is there a florist in there now? Somebody.
No, it was the same, but Joe cut some of it down.
Yeah,
for the
but
beauty
when
shop.
Mr.
But
Birch
that
had
was
it, it was
that was all over.
entire. It was, yeah,
That was
okay,
all
that was what I was.
That was the tobacco department was up in that corner.
Okay. And then you say about Mr. Velletri. Now, was his men's store where, the Millbrook?
Antique Center. is.
Yeah,
that
so
was
that's
where-
where Mr. Seppi and, Jay Murphy had it
Yeah,
when we moved to
yeah.
Millbrook. Okay,
That
yeah,
was it.
thank you.
We had a 5 and 10 cent store there too. We had a 5 and 10 cent store there.
Oh, yeah, it was a 5 and 10. The other half of the drugstore was a 5 and 10.
Right, Mr. Murphy's, yeah, Jay
Mr.
Murphy.
Birch was my uncle. Yes, and upstairs, he had toys. You had to get permission to go in up behind the cash register and go up the stairs and
Toys and wallpaper was upstairs.
Wonderful. Now, next, towards the end, we'll be able to ask questions and everyone can get involved. But I want a lot of people here tonight don't know the community, and this is an opportunity for the women to talk about what they did growing up and also the kinds of occupations that they had. Edith, tell everyone what your dad did growing up, and then why this building's so special for you and for a number of years.
Well, my dad had a farm up on Woodstock Road, and he had a milk delivery route to all the houses in Millbrook. So he delivered every day, 7 days a week. And had a dairy farm of 16 or 18. I want one that says Nygren on it.
It was wonderful. Also,
He
Edith,
sold all the bottles, and I didn't say one with Nygren.
a lot of people are on the lookout for you, that's for sure.
Are they?
Yep, and
good.
if we find them, you'll be the first to know. Also, I think it was wonderful, the story you told me about your parents coming down from up in, was it Rhinebeck? Before, when they moved here?
Yeah, they came from Waterbury, Connecticut, where they met after immigrants from Sweden. And I don't know the stories. I wasn't so nostalgic in those days to ask questions. But anyway, he was brought up on an uncle's farm, and evidently he liked that better than the factory he worked in when he was young. So evidently, somehow they got to Rhinebeck to work on a farm. And then found out somehow that Howard Davidson was looking for a dairyman in Millbrook. And they had to come by wagon, of course, from Rhinebeck to Millbrook.
Tell them how long it took. Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. Did I tell you?
You did. That,
Hell, do you remember?
what I'd remembered,
I think it was all day.
it was all day, from early in the morning. They loaded up their wagon, and with the crack of dawn, they left Rhinebeck, and they got here that evening just as the sun was setting. An entire day with the wagon loaded up with all of their possessions and things.
Which wasn't much, probably.
But it's something that we take for granted, travel now. We don't even think about going into Poughkeepsie and back a couple of times in one day if we need to, if we've forgotten something. But at the time, travel was major. It really was. Wonderful. Now, why is this building special?
Oh, I worked for Paul J. Hayes. This is London's father.
And tell everyone what this building was used for and where you worked.
Well, I was in a little corner, cubby hole down under here. The little room that's been taken away. It's part of what. And then the train came up to it and all of a sudden dumped the coal down in the chute.
So in our parking lot, some of you remember it, many of you don't, the railroad actually came through by the post office directly behind this building and divided. There's a side track here. So Mrs. Layton worked here while the coal was being delivered at Hates. And there's a picture, Scott, I think, downstairs you have.
Well, I remember seeing the coal wagons go down the train. You just remember seeing them go through. I can remember that.
I think it was 1937 that the train stopped. And then Mr. Hayes got big trucks and had his men drive all the way to Pennsylvania to get the coal.
So coal was a major way of life. Many of us who are older remember that, but it's something that very few people would use nowadays. And this was really the heart for that, for the coal delivery service. And a lot of our homes still have coal left over in it, in the basement, in the cracks. You know, of course, things like the snowmen and coal for eyes and all. For generations, that was the norm. But when you explain that to children today, they don't understand what you're talking about, using coal for eyes. But that was such a standard one. Wonderful, wonderful business. Oh, tell them also about delivering milk on Alden Place and what your father needed to do.
There was called Hogan Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all Italian stories. Were you up there? And my father didn't have much schooling, but he had a little book that he kept tabs of weekly customers, and he couldn't understand them, a lot of them. They didn't speak English, so he had by the pump, the back house, the front house, and that's how he kept tabs of
Each family had a code name, and you can imagine Edith, when she was young, would tag along with her father to deliver milk to the community. And her father, who had a very heavy Swedish accent, and the Italian, good Italian ladies on Oldham Place with their Italian accent, communicated by pointing and gesture, and he referred to each of the families by the location, the back house, the stair, the well house. So that's how he kept track of each of the families. And they would say 2 bottles, 2 big bottles. Okay, you write it down and keep record of it. That's part of the wonderful story.
If I may interrupt that,
Yes.
I remember an Italian lady came into the store. We sold glass too for windows, everything at the Virgin. And she had 2 sticks. Oh, she was a sweet old lady. She had 2 sticks. She didn't speak English too well, but she had a stick about that long and a stick about this long. So she wanted to paint a glass. And the length was this way and the width was this way. Well, it took me about 20 minutes to get it to my thick head. What she wanted me to do with these 2 sticks. Finally, I got it. She went home with the paint of glass. Sorry, I had to tell that.
She needs to get warmed up. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, Catherine, tell us about what your family did, and also your remembrances of being in the school and in the community.
Well, I was born, brought up in Millbrook, and never really moved too far away, although I did all my working days were in Poughkeepsie. Well, I know people are interested in about the gas light, but I really, of my own knowledge, don't know anything about it, because I was only 5 years old when my father died, and all this had happened before. But different ones have told me that there were gas lights on just the main streets in Millbrook. Well, for instance, like the Avenue, and I believe Alden Place. Do you remember? And maybe Elm Drive and Merritt Avenue. I think my father went out at night just about dusk to light the gas light. I had an idea that he had to go back again about midnight and put them out, but I'm not sure about it, and I can't verify it because nobody seems to, remember it. But of course in Millbrook, I remembered, as Gert did too, different times we had 5 grocery stores in Millbrook. We had Dean Brothers, which later became John Maroney. We had Wetherell and Moore, which was later Jim Dunn. We had P.H. Keever, where the Country Briar is, where I guess the Slam and Salmon is, was the Seppi brothers, but they were there a very short time because they had to go to service in World War II. We had A&P in Grand Union. The first A&P I remember is where the Millbrook Bakery is. And then I guess maybe Gert, they moved down to where they
Well,
were.
there's a movie theater there. What else do we have? We had more than we got now.
We had
The Y used to be open every night. The kids could go there. And we also have dinners, spaghetti dinners, card parties. The Masons and Eastern Star, they used to always had a couple of card parties a year that we went to. St. Joe's always had a card party. Somewhere else always had, there was always some kind of an activity going on that the whole town would really participate in.
When did Tripp and Hicks come in?
well, I was just going to say that. We also had 2 meat markets.
There used to be where the Judy Cafe is now, isn't it?
I thought it was where Judy was. Where
Well,
Judy
the
is.
Grand Union, that used to be, remember when Keever's store burned down, the one on the corner, then he moved where
the country briar is.
Yeah, well, that is now, well, then the next one used to be Trippin' Hicks.
Well, that's where Judy is, I remember
Yeah.
the steps.
Yeah. This is there.
And then the other meat market was over across from Washington Avenue, I guess across from Rocky's Pizza. And they were real meat markets. They were not connected with grocery stores at all. You just got meat.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember seeing in Trippin' Hicks cooler a pig hanging up, size of beef.
There was always one hanging
They
out.
were butchered right there. They also used to deliver. You call in your order and the meat was delivered. Also, the Key brothers used to send one of the clerks around to take the grocery orders maybe a couple times a week. And then later, that day the clerk would deliver. What else do we have, Gert?
Do you remember?
We had shoemakers, and we always
Oh,
had
yeah,
at least
shoemakers.
two barbers.
And barbers, sometimes we had three barbers, always two. Always two.
Do you remember before the main roads were paved? And they were still dirt?
I can remember them paving 44.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember, because I know Mr. Garfano, I'll never forget him, only he's a little short man, but the sweetest man in the world. I might have been about 5 years old. Oh, he was awfully nice. He always brought me candy. They'd go by, and of course, with kids, we buy them. My brother was always out there watching. And I got a ride on the steamroller. They had a big steamroller. Oh, huge big thing. And he used to give me a ride up and down on the steamroller. I remember that. It was fun.
One of the things I've come through in looking at the village records, one about the gas lights, there was always a constant debate whether or not there was enough moonlight so that they didn't have to light the gas, because it would save money if they did. And that was a big discussion every night that I'm sure your dad had, looking out to see, is it light enough so I don't have to light the lights? Or is it too dark? Because either way, I'm sure the village would feel contrary. The second thing that I came across was hiring people to keep the streets oiled before they were paved. And in the summer, at least once a day, the wagons would go, the horses on the back of them, it had water with little holes, and it would sprinkle the streets to keep the dust out, because dust was such a problem. And that was one of the things that everyone was overjoyed when the roads were finally paved, because it would cut down on all the dust in the village.
If I may add something to that, they were not all overjoyed. They also complained because the children's clothes got dirty with the oil. And they rolled in it.
Kept the dust down though, I guess. Oh, I can remember cars going by the house when we lived up on 44. And the cloud of dust you wouldn't be able to see for a good 10 minutes, really, truly. I mean, that sounds exaggerated, but it's true. Because the dust would, if you had a dry week, a real dry week, it would be amazing. And then once in a while, the automobiles were just going by. You didn't have too many of them. But when one did go by, oh my goodness, you could see that it was like a fire going up the little hill, but you could see that smoke blowing all over, or the dust blowing all over. It really, you forget about it. And now I can remember seeing that too. It was.
How fast were the cars going?
outrageous.
The cars would be going about 30 or 40, 30 or 40 miles an hour.
No, they wouldn't even go that. No, they weren't even going that.
It was 10 miles.
10?
That's early in the century, right after 1900. Speed limit was 10 miles.
The fires always blow out.
Well, I remember Roswell Miller's brother, Bob Miller, he had a Stutz automobile, red one, fancy, one of those racing things. And he used to go a little fast. But then, of course, after the road got paved, nobody cared. He used to race quite a bit of dust. He was a young fellow then, 16 or 17, I would say.
Another story I'm reminded of was Edith's story of walking home to Woodstock from school. And tell what it was like going with your brother walking down, and what happened when one day when it was snowing so bad they let the school out early, and what you needed to do.
I don't think they ever
They didn't never let it out.
Oh, they didn't leave it out early. Okay. I stand corrected. Edith, you tell the story. This is a
You
wonderful
got
one.
there as best you could, and home as best you could, no buses or anything, and we had 3 miles up Stanford Road to Woodstock Road. And I can remember this awful snowstorm and climbing up the hill there by Maroney's, they used to call it, and crying, and it was snow deep. And I was going to say too that my father had to deliver milk every day, and he had to cross over fields even to get away from the deep snow in the roads, because the highway men didn't get around to shoveling. They didn't plow in those days either. They had to shovel. So my dad and the hired man and a neighbor had to shovel down, cross over fields, maybe on a corner, and spend all day delivering the milk, and then had to shovel themselves back home again because it was blowing back in.
And what happened when you were walking home in that blizzard with your brother when it was snowing so bad?
Oh, you were down one
So just about how you got about halfway home and decided you couldn't go any further, you were too tired, and your brother insisted and made you keep walking, and pulled on you and made you go home, because otherwise you would have still been in that snowbank. You wouldn't have been here with it.
There was a family that had been from, their names were Howard, they lived with Mrs. Ripley, that was down on the road over to the Little West. And they had a team of oxen. And I remember they used to go down to the village from back. That was a road from Navasville over. And they used to, they were huge, big things. You already, I could still see them go by. And they used to go by with a sort of a handmade, homemade thing, you know, a big high plow. And they would walk behind them. They would walk behind them.
For keeping them plowed.
They would open the road.
Do you remember another thing about the community? The village had a covered bridge. And now you tend to think of covered bridges as being only in New England, but we had one here too. Do you remember where it was?
Down by the milk factory.
By the milk factory was a covered bridge.
I don't know where the milk factory is.
Oh, yes. Tell everyone where the milk factory was.
Oh, let's see now. That's where the waterworks is now.
The waterworks, the sewage treatment. That was actually a milk factory, and right next to it, crossing over the spillway from the mill pond, was a covered bridge. And I've come across records where people were hired to shovel snow in the winter on that bridge, because everyone had sleds, you see. And if you had the bridge covered, there wouldn't be any snow, so the sleds couldn't go across it. So they had to hire people to shovel snow under the bridge for the sleds in order to get them through.
By the way, the bridge is still there. The cover is not, but the
Cover's not, but the bridge is there.
bridge is still there. Right by that waterfall.
And we had snows in those days.
Oh, heavens, yes.
They call it about 6 inches of blizzard now. And
We have much more
They dig up the yard and everything. The yard's full of junk from them going by with the stupid plow.
And then in the spring you had mud and ruts, all dirt road up Stanford Road to my folks. And we rode bicycles in spring and summer to school, and the ruts were so deep we had to go up on the banks sometimes to get through. It didn't hurt us any.
We were real pioneers in those.
No, I didn't.
And I helped my father peddle milk too when I got old enough. And even when I went to high school, I helped him in the morning and then went to school.
I remember Elmer helping too.
One of our projects that we had in working with the fourth graders with their local history program was coming up with lists of occupations that at one time were very common and everyone thought of them, and nowadays they're so rare. Things like delivering coal, lighting the gas. But another one that was equally important was delivering ice. And we're fortunate enough tonight that we also have someone representing the ice industry here in the village, and that's Tom Fiore. So Tom, you've been trapped, you see. Would you say a few words about delivering ice and what it was like?
I'm waiting for some information. that I'm in touch with.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna get into that.
Okay. We'll have a special evening then on the ice delivery and all but that one. So speaking of that, from your point of view, what about the ice? Tell us about the ice. Tom will do it another night, but the three of you.
Oh, I remember John's father delivering ice, and I remember all the kids, we couldn't wait for the iceman to come and ship the ice, and we...
I mean, all the whole
Okay, we're
When
going
I was driving the Model T, helping my father deliver milk when I was 12 years old in the village. No cops, I didn't have a license.
They weren't as strict in those days as I was since they are now.
Well, when my mother got her license, I know the important thing was, they said, Rita, do you know how to drive? Yeah, I know how to drive. But she didn't know how to back up. So she spent 5 years driving, and she could only park the car if she knew that she could pull out straight, because she didn't know how to back the car up.
Well, when we had to drive into a driveway, whatever, I don't know why, I was driving and I pulled in and I tell my father, well, you can drive out. He says, well, if you can't drive out too, he says, you won't drive at all. So I learned how to back out.
Wonderful stories. Now, the two of you were in school together in classes, so this is sort of a question right off the top of my head. What's the earliest memory that the two of you have of each other? Do you remember what class or teacher it may have been?
High school friend. Of course, she was in a village and I was out. So as soon as the school was closed, I went on home.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't associate with anybody in town.
You didn't socialize with those your home.
I think it was high school though.
I think so.
Do any of you remember students that would come in and board in the village
Oh, yeah.
so they could go to school?
Yeah, they come in Monday morning and go home Friday night.
That,
They used to come, excuse me, they used to come from, when I was in school, from Bangor on the train. They used to come down in the morning, and then they would have, there was the Jack McGraw's mother. And so used to had 3 or 4 of them, maybe a couple of girls stayed there, but I know 3 or 4 of them used to eat their lunch there. They didn't bring it, they had their lunch there, and then they went back on the train in the afternoon.
Well, you know what my husband did? He came in on the train from Bangor, and then when school was out, they had to stay at school for a while. No, they didn't. They could leave that. We went down to Sotero's and played pool.
Oh, sure, that would do something with the train.
We found many references of children coming in from the outlying regions to attend the high school, and some of them would come from as far away as Burbank by train on a Monday morning and board all week, and then go home to Burbank Friday night to spend the weekend with their families.
Well, one of my sisters
One
taught
of the Delavernes, remember Mason Delaverne?
I do.
They were, wasn't it his
Salt
sister?
Point.
Was his sister, one of those girls that, I think it was his sister used to board in there, doing all the week.
I don't know.
I think so.
I never
So,
looked at
listen, he and another fellow and girl, I can't remember their names, but I know that girl, very pretty girl, she blonde. I can't remember her name.
remember
Not
Mrs.
her
Elder's
name,
sister, I remember
she used to
him.
board all the weekend. She used to stay up in Trenton Corners, I think, in Bangor. I remember one of them used to board all the whole weekend.
So it's very common. Well, any questions from the audience? Anything you'd like to ask or add to?
Edith, which one-room schoolhouse did you go to?
Went to Millbrook schools.
But I mean for the first grades, for the lower grades.
I didn't go to kindergarten, but where's my...
Oh, you started right in
I was too
Millbrook.
small, but I started first grade in Millbrook here.
The law
It
was
was just
set.
as close as going up to Turnpike where the one-room school was.
Or Hibernia.
Or Hibernia, right.
Yeah, they would have been, I was wondering which,
The law was set up so that no child would have to walk more than 3 miles to attend a school. So that meant one-room schoolhouses, in theory at least, were set up 6 miles apart. So Edith, we clocked it once, actually, after she told me that. And where she was on Woodstock Road to the village of Millbrook was 3 miles. And from her house to the other end of Woodstock Road was just over 3 miles. So you were actually sort of right in the middle, but it leaned to it. So when you think about first graders walking 3 miles, all times of the year, and that was the standard, and people were overjoyed to be able to do that.
Well, once in a while, my folks would come with their horses and buggy.
Gertrude?
But they were busy
Mm-hmm.
on the farm and the farmhouse.
Yes.
Well, who was the teacher in the one-room schoolhouse in Mandersville?
Mrs. Sackett. Mrs.
Susan
Sackett.
Sackett, yeah, I remember her.
Sure, you remember her. Sure you do.
We found, as far as school teachers, you wonder how they would provide them. Well, if you successfully graduated from high school, and if you would get the recommendation of one of the supervising teachers or principals in the district, you were allowed to then turn around and teach at the elementary level in the one-room schoolhouses. And if you did that for 2 years and were satisfactory at it, then they would give you not a diploma, but a certificate that would allow you to teach at the elementary level. Then, if you were really ambitious, you'd go off to the normal school, and our closest one I think would be New Paltz. And if you went for 2 years at the normal school, you'd be able to get a certificate to teach high school. Then, if you were really ambitious, you'd go for another 2 years and get your bachelor's degree, but very few teachers would have had a 4-year. Most would have had a 2 at the secondary level. Yes?
My mother graduated from Millbrook High School, I think in 1918, maybe 1917. And she went to Pine Plains and boarded for a year to what was Seymour Smith Academy. It's now the elementary school in Pine Plains. And after that, she taught at Shady Gal School.
Seymour Smith, as a matter of fact, Seymour Smith was the only secondary school for anyone on this side of the county. Most of the communities had schools, but the average was through 6th grade. Some, the larger ones, would go through 8th grade, but most was 6th. And Seymour Smith was the only secondary school that was available through 12th grade. And because of that, when Millbrook High School opened, that was why there was such pressure to have another high school available. And many of you remember Prof. Anderson, who became the first principal. He actually got his degree from Seymour Smith. It was the only place that he could go, and he boarded in Pine Plains in order to get the degree for that. So we take so much for granted nowadays that a few generations ago really would have been exceptional. Any more questions or comments?
I just wanted to ask Catherine something. I remember one time at an earlier Historical Society meeting, Catherine, you were talking about where stores were, and you mentioned that there was a millinery store, a woman sold ribbons and made hats, and that would have been located where?
Well, it's not,
It was where you went into the diner to the left, excuse me, Kathy. But that building has been torn down.
Oh, where the parking lot is now? Oh, okay.
the Moore House was there, and the little millinery shop was added on. There were 2 rooms.
We do, thanks to you. Some of you may recall photographs. Part of our project we had for the newspaper last year was providing views of early businesses. And Edith very kindly lent us glass plate negatives that were in the house, I believe.
My
when you're
folks bought this house on Woodstock Road from the Tassel family, and there was an attic on the 3rd floor, and after they moved there, they found these glass negatives, and one of the Van Tassel men, I guess, did photography and made them. And that one was a Moore's Hat Shop.
Yes. So we were fortunate that we were able to get half a dozen early businesses in the village done from those glass plate negatives. So it shows you that you never really know where something's going to turn up, where someone may open the trunk and find a photograph or a picture or a view. And that's really if you think of history as a giant puzzle with lots of little pieces, we've got a lot of pieces missing, but one by one, given enough time, we'll find them all and get the picture back together again. And that's the goal of the Historical Society.
I have another question for you ladies. I think it was Anna DeFazio told me that where the Giffords lawyers, Mrs. Gifford has her lawyer's office, was that originally an Italian grocery store?
Yes, it was.
They own the building.
The name of it?
What was the name of it? Oh, Patron, okay.
And the building next to Paris and
No.
that was a barn, or that was something else?
That was the Mason Hall, was it?
I don't understand where she was.
Paris and Minot, of course.
The coffee shop.
That was Masonic Temple.
And what was it before that? Before it was the Masonic Temple, it was even the club. It was the Millbrook Club. 1907 is when it opened, and that was set up. It was a private club, but it was set up before the YMCA was built in the other building, so they offered the same kinds of amusements.
Was that a men's club or?
Yeah.
It was a men's club.
Where was the Warriors?
The Y building is where the Village Hall is now, right? The Village Hall.
And when we went to school, from where Alden is now, they tore down the brick building, but we had to walk from there to the YMCA for our work in the same high school.
I even did that.
You're good at doing
Any other questions or comments or things that anyone would like to add?
And the Professor Anderson would stand up, we'd line up by the outside door to go down to the gym, and Professor Anderson would stand up top of the stairs and snap his finger, 1, 2, 3, now go.
You went to my tour, now that's right.
The janitor, Mr. Story stood there with us.
When Edith went in 1930 to Washington, D.C., they had a picture taken. And that's also there, the class picture that Edith had and let us borrow. So make sure you look at it. Catherine, did you go that year? I can't remember.
I went to the alumni ball, and I guess, dancing, I was hot, and I must have sat in the grass. I was sick, I couldn't go.
Well, you'll find also as you look through before everyone leaves tonight, try to find Catherine and try to find Gert, because they're in the pictures too, and I think you'll enjoy seeing them as they attended the school. Well, that's, unless anyone has any other questions or comments?
I was going to say,
Yes.
too, my father held help for 40 years.
40 years.
Every day, every day. And the doctor used to make house calls.
The last question I have for that, the last official question, is now that we've heard what it was like when they were growing up and their thoughts on it, I'm going to ask each of them to tell us what they think the greatest change has been that they've seen in the community or in the area in their lifetime. Gert, we started with you before. Why don't we start with you?
What do you mean, for good?
Whatever you think.
I don't know. I think it's all pathetic. There are too many antique centers and not enough business. Not enough. There should be at least another grocery store should be here. And there could be a clothing store that you didn't have to go down to that mall all of the time to buy anything that you could wear. I mean, it just seems sad. No, I don't think there's a lot of changes, but I can't say they're for the better.
Okay, to be positive, can you think of one good change?
I don't know enough about it to say.
Okay.
My mind don't go that far.
Okay, Gert, well, that's fair enough. Edith, what's your feeling in terms of
Cars.
the cars?
In Joe
Indoor plumbing. Indoor plumbing, that's another thing. Oh, water. We didn't get that until 1928. And we had to build the electrical line ourselves. Let's see, it was halfway up Stanford Road, and then the other neighbors up above to Woodstock didn't want to put in on it, so my father drove across the fields, the Maronis and there must have been, I don't know how many poles, but he had to guarantee Central Hudson $8.75 a month for electricity, whether you used it or not.
So
That's
that,
1928. Then we got it back. We got it back.
so it's major change having electricity.
Oh, the most
In the
wonderful thing,
Yes.
when you could push a button or pull a chain, because I can remember doing the homework at the table like this, with a hanging lamp.
Well, we didn't even have a hanging one.
Oh, it was got electricity, it was just wonderful. And of course the water and sewage too.
The city was doing
For fire protection, if nothing else, we had
She was
fire
certified.
here
She
in
was
16.
1916, when that whole block went.
So the electricity and the water, those are the two things.
Most important.
So you see, there was something positive. Good. Well,
Take it all back.
Right. Happy to hear that, aren't you, Gary? That something positive. Well, yes.
One question. What year did you say the railroad ceased to go through there?
1937.
37.
And we have a picture of it going through our local land.
And that was the blizzard of '88, I think, that picture was taken. Was that? I think it was '88. I think it was '88. With the blizzard.
I can remember one winter, the train got stopped on a corner of one of our fields. There was so much snow they couldn't get through. And somehow or other, people came up to their house to get warm while they were trying to get the train out in the snow.
Wonderful. Would it be
Good
nice
old
to?
days.
Would it be nice if the train back again? We could really use it now. A lot of push to do that. It's true. Yes, Gert.
All politicians ask one question. You feel better now than you did then. You're better off now than you were then.
Don't pin me down.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We'll be around for a bit if you'd like to talk to us informally. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions. Make sure you look at the photographs before you leave. They're really special. And Scott has a few words to tie it up. Thank you very much.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you very much.
Good little fellow.
If anybody who's not a member would like to sign up and be a member, Harold is right over there. He's our treasurer. He can get you signed up. Scout flyers, or if you want to give to the scholarship program, Harold can do that too. Thank you for coming. And next month we'll be here, and it's going to be a Civil War month. Katie Beach will be showing us the Civil War month. Thank you.
This is the Town of Washington Historical Society meeting on March 20th, 1997, and Gertrude Whalen Clark and Catherine Donohue and Edith Nygren Layton were the guest speakers.